Good evening, everybody. Welcome to Borough Fan TV and the Monday Night Show with me, James Hutchinson. Joining me again this week is Joe Scott. Welcome to the show, Joe.
Hi, Chase.
All right, mate?
I'm not too bad.
Good stuff, good stuff. Loads to catch up on this week, Borough fans. Obviously, it's been a couple of weeks since we've been on the air. We had the QPR away game, and we've had the Barnsley game on Saturday, which saw Borough get their first win of the season. 4 welcome points from those 2 games. Have added moved Borough up to the top half of the table in the Championship, aided by the goals of recent signing Chuba Akpom. We're also going to look at new signings that may be coming into the club. Obviously, the last few days have seen a lot of speculation about Patrick Roberts returning to the club. Also, what about Borough fans not being able to return to the Riverside Stadium? We had 1,000 in for the Bournemouth game. What do you make of the government's decision to shelve plans for fans to return to the games until possibly 6 months' time? How will that affect you? So, as always, this show's nothing without you, Borough fans. So get in touch, share your views, get involved in the show here tonight on Borough Fan TV. So, welcome again, Joe. Just over a week ago, Chuba Akpom made his debut at QPR, and he couldn't have made a better start, could he?
Definitely. We were on the market for a striker for quite a while, and I was quite surprised, to be honest. We went for someone like Chuba Akpom, someone, when he started off as an Arsenal player, he had a few loan spells at the likes of Forest, Brighton, and Hull as well. And didn't quite get off as well in England, but he had that 2 seasons in Greece with POAK and did well with them, scored the goals for them, even scored goals in the qualifiers of the Champions League. And then all of a sudden he decides to come here for, I think it was around the £3 million mark.
Yeah. No, it was a good sign. He seems popular with the fans at the minute. I know Ray Hoggy seems to be quite happy with Chuba's start at the Borough. Just in terms of another transfer, we mentioned Patrick Roberts at the top of the show, Joe, and Simon Colton. Thanks for getting in touch. Simon's asked, are we definitely getting Roberts? Now, we obviously don't know, but there is some speculation that the deal might be concluded tonight. Is that right, Joe?
Yeah, hopefully roundabouts. I think Neil Warnock said after the Barnsley, it's just a matter of the paperwork that's needed to sort it out. And plus, I've seen from some bit on social media that Patrick Roberts was spotted outside this morning. So it's just a matter of the formalities could be completed for Patrick Roberts to obviously see him return to the Borough, which hopefully we'd like to see. When he came to us at the back end of January, I think he had that good promising start, and obviously he had that injury which brought him back for the remainder until after lockdown basically. And he kept on going from there. He scored that beauty of a goal against Reading. And hopefully, we'll like to see him come back, produce the goods. Obviously, there's been a lot of talk as well about possibly Marcus Brown as well. He could be on his way out on loan again. Possibility of him probably going back to Oxford, I think, James. So it'd be... it's obviously, him getting his first goal, I think, for the other day against Bournemouth, but he does that need a little more experience out in League One, I think.
Yeah. And
also, the only other rumour that I've seen so far from this window is the Liverpool centre-back, Nathaniel Phillips. Possibly he might be coming on loan. Plus, a little fact for Borough fans, he's the son of former Borough defender. So there's a collision if we want to bring Nathaniel Phillips in from Liverpool on loan. So, but a lot can happen between now and then because, like I said, Hutchie, Premier League clubs and EFL clubs can still do deals until 5 p.m. on October the 16th. So, still a lot of time to get a couple of players in.
There is, mate. Well, if we go back to the QPR game, obviously, just mentioned there about Chuba Akpom getting his first goal, and Simon again's come up with a decent point there. It always seems, I don't know why it is with Middlesbrough, but with strikers, it seems to be almost like a graveyard for strikers, no matter what their reputation, how much we've paid for them.
Yeah.
Strikers seem to struggle when they come to the club. Why do you think that might be, Joe?
I don't know. I think it's one of them cases of getting embedded towards their new surroundings, obviously, and it's a new club as well. And in Chuba Akpom's case, I think he like I said, the return, the stint he had in Greece probably helped him get into the back to the swing of things, being back in the UK. Obviously, he took that goal from he took the goal well against QPR, and like I say, I expect a lot of good things from Chuba. But I think going back to the striker's perspective, I think it's like I said, it could come down to a confidence being in a new club, basically. But sometimes it works, sometimes it can't. So it's just a matter of confidence of settling in, pretty much.
Mm-hmm. I know I mentioned there about Nathaniel Phillips. Pete Robbo seems to believe that he may be off to Swansea, which might be a shame. But again, it's all speculation at the minute. We don't quite know. Yeah. Again, that QPR game, like the Bournemouth match, Joe, the goal came from a delivery from Paddy McNair. I mean, are we seeing him becoming increasingly important to the team? And where do you see his best position for the Borough?
I mean, it was a blessing in disguise that we've kept Paddy McNair, to be honest, because there was speculation at the start of the season that he was going to be moved on before the start of the season. And I think Stoke was one of the clubs that were interested in him, but I think that seems to wear off. And I think we're sort of glad that we kept him in the way, I think, because I think with Warnock and his man management, I think we're getting the absolute best out of Paddy McNair, I think. As far as position goes, I usually like to see Paddy McNair in that holding midfield position. Obviously, I like to see a good partnership coming in between him and Sam Morsey, possibly. Mm-hmm. But saying that, Saville did play well in the game on Saturday, so it's just a matter of if I like to see McNair in that creative midfield position, I'd pretty much prefer to see a partnership between him and Sam Morsey, I think.
Yeah. I mean, just before we move on from the QPR game, obviously during that match we lost Grant Hall and Dale Fry came on to replace him. Now, he made a massive contribution in that game that was holding on for a point, and then he backed it up with another impressive display at the weekend against Barnsley. How important do you think it is that Dale Fry has a good season towards Borough enjoying a successful season as a club this year, Joe?
Well, it's in Dale Fry to keep him at the club. Obviously, local lad. Obviously, there were interest from Premier League clubs, obviously, for him, in this window. But it's obviously unfortunate, the injury to Grant Hall happened. But I think Fry just came in at the right time, and particularly that clearance against QPR. I mean, that was crucial to us even getting a point at QPR, to be honest. Mm-hmm. And
were you happy with the point then, Joe? Were you disappointed to get a draw at QPR? What was your feelings at the end of that game?
I think at QPR, if we looked on chances overall, I think even though we had a goal disallowed for offside with Akpom, I think, in my opinion, I think a point was actually a fair result for both teams at the end of the day, even though QPR had a couple of chances possibly to win it. So I would have taken a point anyway coming out of that game with the attempts that QPR were making towards the end of the second half. And like I said, if not for Dale Fry making that clearance, I think, we would have come there with nothing instead of a point.
Yeah. I mean, there's a few players there that are getting a mention. Pete Robbo's mentioning Sam Morsey. And then Paul Nicholas has also mentioned there about Anthony Dykesdale, who's been like a new signing. And that's a fair point. Dykesdale has made a massive transformation from his form at the beginning of last season to since Neil Warnock's arrived at the club, hasn't he, Joe?
Yeah, I think he's certainly getting him and playing in his best position, even though most of us probably will still see Dykesdale as a right wing back or right back. I think putting him into the centre back position has obviously done wonders for him. I think Warnock definitely sees something in Dykesdale as a centre back more than an actual right back, to be honest. So it's good. It's good, we're getting the best out of him, because Dykesdale didn't have the when he came to the Borough, he didn't have the best of starts. Obviously, an injury hit season. I think that Dykesdale had last season when he came to us. So I think like I said, I think we're getting him the best out of him playing in a centre-back type role instead of playing as a full-back.
Yeah. Just mentioning there Neil Warnock and maybe his effect on players like Dykesdale and the rejuvenation of Dale Fry and other players. Marcus Brown obviously scored the goal against Bournemouth. Mark Bowler came back at the weekend and put in a decent performance. It was obviously the build-up to the game at the weekend was a lot of attention was given to the fact that it was Neil Warnock's 1500th game in charge in the dugout. It's some achievement, that, isn't it? And I mean, he was certainly at his best again at the weekend. He was getting on the officials' cases, wasn't he?
Oh yeah, because I think there was a lot of cases there that the referee had a bit of an air that game, and obviously Warnock let him know about it. So, but yeah, it was a great achievement for Warnock. Obviously, one of the best managers I think in the league, in the whole of England. In fact, probably up there with the echelons of like Brian Clough is like one of the best England managers ever to never manage England, basically. So,
that's some statement, that, Joe. You rate him that highly, do you?
Yeah, I think I remember him mostly from his time at Sheffield United in the mid 2000s, and I've always known then he was going to be one of them managers who's a bit like Brian Clough in a way, but obviously more in your face and more and comes to the best in terms of man management when it comes to players. So I think it was when the time that we did get rid of Jonathan Woodgate, I think Warnock came in at possibly the right time to help us rebuild the club in a way, pretty much.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I would agree in that sense. I think in terms of where we're at now with a club that's not awash with a lot of money, and in the situation in terms of the world, the climate with COVID and all the restrictions that go with it, I don't think in terms of managers we could be in better hands. I think he's ideally suited to our club at the minute, and I think we're very fortunate to have him. And maybe in the past, Borough fans would have been a little bit like, oh, I'm not really a fan of Neil Warnock. And he mentioned himself at the weekend about he sometimes feels as though his teams unfairly get tied with the long ball game label. In fairness, I didn't see a great deal of long ball football at the weekend. I thought we played some good stuff again, and we're creating chances, more chances than we have for a number of years at the minute, aren't we?
Yeah, particularly, ever since we had Pulis at the club, we were crying out for a more attacking edge, and obviously we had a try with it with Woodgate. Obviously that didn't work out, and obviously from bad looks of things, I think Warnock has actually got us playing in the style of football that us Borough fans were probably would have been desperate to wanted to see for at least 3 or 4 years, pretty much.
Yeah. Just looking at the transfer, we've touched on it a little bit with Patrick Roberts. David Towers, thanks for watching, David. He said, if we get Roberts, that's great, but we still need at least another centre-half and possibly another creative player. Obviously, we mentioned there about Grant Hall being injured. We don't know how long he's going to be out for. And obviously, Nathaniel Phillips is a centre-half and can play in that position. We've been linked with him. So do you think Patrick Roberts is the final piece in the jigsaw, Joe? Do you think there'll still be possibly 1 or 2 more to come in before a week on Friday?
I think Roberts will definitely be the final piece in the puzzle in terms of creative. But I think it's more the defence that needs to be prioritised now. Obviously, with Grant Hall out of action for at least a couple of more weeks, I think possibly another centre back, like I say, with Nathaniel Phillips, probably get him in on loan for the season, and we probably could do with. I think another wing back will probably do us. Obviously, I think there's one report that we've been linked with Randall Williams from Exeter City, who's one been mentioned. So we could. And I think he's on high wages. I think Exeter down in League 2. So there's a possibility we could come in for him, because I've seen Randall Williams in action on the box before. He does look like the sort of player who can get forward. And obviously we touched. There's been touch on Jed Spence. Obviously, not performing well at the minute, but I think if you sign someone like Randall Williams who can go forward, who can go at you from the right back position, I think he could come of use to us this season if we do go back in for him.
Yeah. And do you think maybe that's what Spence needs in a way? Maybe needs a little bit of competition for his place, because I know he was left out the weekend, but maybe do you think there's any complacency in there, and that's maybe why Neil Warnock took him out the starting lineup at the weekend? So do you think he would probably benefit from a new player coming in that position?
I think so. Like I said, we could do numbers in that position. Obviously, Spence I think he's just a bit low on confidence at the moment. And obviously that's why Warnock took him off the position for the game on Saturday. But like I say, if we bring someone in to give them that competition, obviously, like I said, with Randall Williams from Exeter, I think that'll be the kick up the backside, I think, for what Jed Spence does actually need at the moment.
Mm-hmm. Tony McKenna's with you there, Joe. He's always like Warnock. He's the right manager we need, and the type to give them a kick up the proverbial. And I think that's fair point, that, Tony. I think maybe some players did need that at the club. Another big Borough fan out there, Pete Robbo. Thanks for watching, Pete. He said, can I ask about Hayden Coulson? He's not getting played much. I think he only came on for a couple of minutes again at the weekend. Might he move on? I don't know if we can really afford to get rid of any more players. I think we've got a squad of about 18 at the minute, and I don't think you'd like to see Coulson go, would you, Joe?
I mean, he could come at use. Obviously, I think Warnock just prefers Johnson, I think, over Coulson at the minute for why I don't know. I think it's something to do with he hasn't got any trust at the moment with Coulson, I think, or it could be something to do with the fact that he could have one player, like say, have a bit of pace in him, and the other one obviously not. But we don't know at the moment. I don't know why, because he prefers like Johnson, and obviously Bowler's just come back in as well to play in that position. So I don't know what the deal is at the moment between Warnock and Coulson.
Well, at the weekend, obviously, what impressed me in a way, Joe, was that first half started a little bit slowly, but I was impressed that we didn't let our heads go down when obviously Chuba Akpom missed a great chance. We had a goal disallowed. The keeper made a great save from Saville. And we got the goal just before half-time. Then in the second half, we upped the tempo even more, I thought. And it was great again to see Akpom on the score sheet again, and a proper striker's goal as well, wasn't it?
It was as well. I think we possibly can end the talk of us having another striker, because I think Akpom, because certainly filled in that void. I think we're scoring 2 goals from 2 games and you opening 2 games. Could certainly fit him well. You know, in that game as well, I think I've heard a couple of Barnsley fans were saying that I heard a couple of Barnsley fans that were saying that obviously their manager Gerhard Struber obviously wasn't bothered about picking a particular squad at all, because obviously he's going to be moving on to America anyway. So I think we just caught Barnsley, flat-footed at the wrong time, and obviously we took advantage of that, grabbing the win, and obviously we conceded a penalty, which for no reason is a big deal at all. We already had the game won anyway. So I think the 3 points going into this international break coming up will certainly give us the confidence going into the next couple of games, which is quite ironically, Hutchie, because we're playing 2 sides next that have got 100% records in the league.
Yeah, we'll touch on that a bit later on, Joe. Dave Richardson, thanks for watching, Dave. Another big fan. I know your views on Britt Assombalonga. I've heard them often enough on the concourse in the North Stand. He's saying, I just can't see Britt doing the biz for us scoring. We need more strikers. Do you think any more strikers will come in, Joe? Do you think he's settled on now Fletcher, Assombalonga and Akpom as his 3?
Possibly maybe room to bring in possibly one on loan, I think, in this window. But I think by the looks of it, I think having both Fletcher, Akpom and Assombalonga, I think could do all right senior-wise. But I think having probably another one on loan, possibly if either one of them gets injured. So I'd definitely say probably one on loan and then see how it goes.
Yeah. I mean, I think we're going to struggle to... I don't think we want to probably have players leaving, because I think the squad's thin enough as it is. Yeah. And in terms of bringing players in, Kevin Blackwell alluded to about a week ago that we may not be able to bring much more in because of the financial restrictions now, with no fans coming into games and stuff like that. But the club might have to tighten things even more so now. So it could well be that Patrick Roberts might be the last player coming in. I hope not. Hopefully there might be another one, possibly 2 coming in after that. But it wouldn't surprise me if Roberts was the last one, because it doesn't appear as though the finances, not just at the Borough, but at many clubs at Championship level, are going to be there.
Yeah, every club is going to be struggling around this time at the moment. And also we are no exception, you know. Because if Roberts happens to be, you know, the last bit of business we do in this window, then obviously we'll just go with the flow of what we got really. But
Yeah.
I would definitely like to see probably one or two more possibly coming on loan, and I would be happy with it anyway. But at the moment, say if Roberts is the last player to come through the door in this window, we'll just make do with what we got from now until January, pretty much.
Yeah. I mean, another player that's just joined the club and played a big part in the win on Saturday, and I think will become a big fans' favourite of the Borough, is Sam Morsey. What did you make of his partnership with George Saville in the game against Barnsley?
Well, most of us have been calling out anyway for Sam Morsey to get more game time, because I think he's the sort of player that we've needed around the club since quite possibly Grant Leadbitter. Pretty much, he's a leader in the midfield, position, which we been lacking for the last couple of seasons. And I think he obviously did a fine job, you know, at Wigan. You know, obviously unfortunate circumstances for what they've been through last season, and obviously Wigan had to offload some of the players, obviously for that financial state point of view. And obviously we were fortunate enough to grab probably one of the key components in that Wigan team in Morsey. So Morsey will definitely become a fan's favourite over time with the Borough. So I think, like I say, he's up there with it's definitely up there with the sort of player that we need and the leader that we need in that midfield position since Grant Leadbitter left.
Yeah. No, I think he will become very popular with fans. I think he's got a little bit of devil in him. He doesn't mind putting his foot in. He'll get on at other players. He'll get on at the officials. I think he'll pick up his fair share of probably suspensions and stuff. But I just think he's the sort of player that we need in our team. I think we've been a bit of a soft touch the last few years, and I think Morsey will make us a bit tougher to beat, a bit more of a championship type side, which maybe we haven't been at times in the last couple of seasons.
Yeah.
Just before we move on from the Barnsley game, Corley Woodrow got a late penalty for them. But we got our first win of the season. But also, that's our first league win since Boxing Day, Joe. And also our first win since lockdown at home when there's been no fans in the ground. From a psychological point of view, bearing in mind it's probably going to be like this for maybe the next 6 months, how important was it that we won that game on Saturday?
It was crucial. Obviously, when the lockdown came in, and obviously, like you said, since Boxing Day, we've never experienced any success at home at all, pretty much, except for 1 or 2 victories in the cup. But apart from that, you know, it's one of them. It was crucial that we needed those 3 points, especially going into the international break, like I said, like a few minutes ago. And then going into those games, obviously, with the ones coming up, obviously, which we'll get to in a sec, are both going to be difficult. So it was crucial that we got that win against Barnsley, I think. So it's the perfect tonic for what we need to set up in order to build up our form going into the next few months.
Yeah. And like we said, the only disappointing thing regarding the weekend, Joe, was that there's no fans in the ground. And that's even more disappointing after the Bournemouth game, the previous league match, which appeared to pass off without any problems, seemed to be a great success. And now all of a sudden it's like no fans in the ground again. It's massively disappointing, isn't it?
Yeah, and especially those who've renewed the season tickets for next season. Obviously, there's going to be from now until possibly even between March and April that we might not be able to get inside the grounds, and it's obviously going to be frustrating for many, especially financial wise. Obviously, the money that comes into most people come into the club is from turnstile admissions, and obviously we're not going to have much of that, and possibly until at least towards the late point of the season, I think, like March, April time. So I think, as probably you and I have done over the last couple of weeks or so, is try and get to some non-league games. Obviously, we've been to a fair few over the last couple of months, more particularly Stockton Town or even the likes of Thornaby, Gisborne Town, all them. They can do well with the money as well. And so obviously it's gutting not to be at the Riverside, but like you and I have done, there's like local sides who could do with few admission gates and a bit of money in the kitty, so to speak.
Yeah. I mean, a lot of people have mentioned inside football at the moment that at championship level lower, that a lot of clubs may go to the wall if fans aren't allowed in the ground over the next 6 months. Do you think that's over the top, Joe? Or do you think that's a real possibility?
Maybe for a few clubs, possibly like in possibly like League Two and possibly in the National League and the National League North and South, etc. But as far as some championship clubs obviously do have pretty much foreign owners, except for us and a couple of other clubs. I don't know. I think it's just mainly for the clubs like from League Two and possibly below are going to be the ones that obviously have been hit hard over the fans not being at the ground. So it's just hard to call it this minute, Hutchie, to be honest.
Yeah. I mean, Pete Nichols, thanks for getting in touch, Paul, sorry, beg your pardon, Paul. Could easily put 1,500 fans in each stand and do it safely. Football needs fans. And Pete Robbo has followed up there with, there was 11,500 fans apparently at Dortmund yesterday. I mean, it just, like I say, it just makes it even worse that we had 1,000 in, no issue, apparently no issue 2 weeks ago. Other countries around Europe, I mean, the Europa League, the group games will be starting in a couple of weeks' time. British teams will be going abroad to play games, and there'll be fans in the ground backing their teams when our teams are playing back in England and in Scotland. There'll be no fans in the ground. It just seems as though we've got things badly wrong, doesn't it?
Yeah, because with the recent spike in cases, obviously, that's obviously put a knockback on us going back to the grounds and supporting our teams, which we love. As far as other clubs go, obviously, I think it's a case of their governments handling the pandemic well. I think obviously for Borussia Dortmund getting like an 11,500 in their ground on a social distance basis, obviously, which is good for them. It's a big improvement for, like, provides a bit of hope for possibly most clubs around the world of a chance of getting fans back to the ground. But for us, it's a completely different story, which it's the fact that we don't know when we're going to go back into our grounds. So it's just a case of hearing hope, to be honest, James. I think it's just a case of when the time comes that Boris does decide to allow us back in the grounds. But I think it'll be one safety precaution at a time, I think.
Yeah. I mean, this is a really interesting point. Craig Cameron Close, thanks for getting in touch, Craig. Said he watched the Orlando Red Bull New York game. Florida is really bad for COVID, yet there was fans in the game, in the ground in Orlando there. And I suppose it's a difficult position for the government to be in, and those people that are governing football and what they should be doing for the best. But it's where does it end? You might get to 6 months' time and it might be, well, no, we're still not ready for fans to come in the ground. And do you think we maybe get to a point and we say, do you know what, we're going to have to start letting people into the ground, because otherwise clubs will go to the wall, then there'll be nothing to watch in a year's time for these clubs, and the effect that has on a local community. I mean, just from your own personal point of view, Joe, as a fan, what does it mean to you not to be able to go to the Riverside and watch Borough games? How does that affect you?
Obviously, it sometimes affects me mentally because I'm obviously autistic, and that comes with certain aspects of mental aspects of being kind of down, not being at the Riverside pretty much every weekend for a Borough game. And it's just one of them, you know. It's really hard to take at this point. Obviously, going back to Craig's comment, and it's not just football that are letting fans back in. Obviously, I think there's the NFL, American football have started letting their fans in, because obviously I'm a big follower of the Miami Dolphins team, and they've just started letting crowds back in on a couple of occasions, and it seems to work well.
Yeah. Going
back to obviously my perspective, like saying me being on the autism spectrum, is that because some people, it affects people's mental health, basically, of not being able to be at the grounds pretty much mostly every weekend. So it's difficult for me at the moment, but like I say, I'm trying to find alternatives, like going back saying I've been going to going to a couple of non-league games probably during this pandemic where they do allow like limited crowds, and I do get a sense of enjoyment. I would at Borough games, so it's obviously affecting me mentally not being at the Riverside, but it's just a matter of case of waiting really, which obviously one part helps and one part doesn't. It's just one of those,
Yeah.
It's hard to tell at this point.
Yeah. Well, like you say, Joe, hopefully we'll be back in the ground soon and we can meet up with the people we normally meet up at the games. We can have a chat and have a pint with them and stuff like that. And all the things I think maybe before we took for granted. And I'm sure when the time comes for when football fans are allowed back into the grounds, I'm sure we'll appreciate it more than ever.
Yeah.
I mean, Pete Robbo's just mentioned there. Thanks again, Pete. Can clubs afford a refund season tickets? And I know at the Borough this year, obviously you got a rebate on your season ticket that you missed games last season towards covering this season. Well, to be honest, I think you're going to end up getting that rebated for next season. Now those 10,000 that have bought it for this season. But as you make a point there, Pete, will clubs be able to do that lower down the pyramid? Possibly not. And but then it might be a choice that fans might have to turn around and say, well, do we want the money back from our club, or do we want our club to go out of business? Because the clubs will still need the money if in the lower leagues they're playing behind closed doors because they still have to pay the players. So there's a lot of tough decisions to be made, both for clubs, for fans, and for everybody higher up in terms of football. We'll move on to transfers again. We've obviously mentioned Patrick Roberts about him on the verge of signing with the club. Before we leave that one, would you be happy to see him come back, Joe? And what sort of contribution did you think he made in the 11 games he was with us last season?
Yes, obviously, like I said, I think it's obviously the number 10 player that we've been craving to getting at the start of the season, which obviously we didn't have for that first couple of games. And obviously, Roberts, when we bought him in January on loan from Man City, I think he certainly gave us the attacking standpoint, which obviously we did. And then obviously, like I said, he had that injury after the first couple of games, and obviously we missed him at that point. And obviously, when obviously the lockdown happened, I think when Roberts came in and scored that goal against Reading, I think proved we could do with obviously having him back for a full season back at the Borough. So hopefully, with the news, that it's almost done of him coming back to the Borough, I think would definitely be a good boost for the club, I'd say.
Yeah, good stuff. Well, as you mentioned earlier, and I know a few people have been watching the program tonight have mentioned that the loan window stays open, or transfers between clubs in England stays open until a week on Friday, the 16th of October. The day after that, Reading will bring their 100% record to the Riverside Stadium. How surprised have you been by their start of the season, Joe? And do you see them as genuine promotion contenders?
Judging by what I've seen from them at the minute, they're definitely going to be up there at the end of the season. Plus the fact they've got a manager in Veljko Paunovic. I think he guided Atlanta United to their MLS title at one point. So they looked a decent side so far this season. I've been really impressed with them, especially if you got the likes of George Puskás, and obviously Lucas Zhau's just come into form for them at the right time. Mm-hmm. And obviously they've got players like John Swift and Ovi Ajaria who can cause a threat. So I'm surprised by the start that Reading have made this season, and it's obviously going to provide a tough test for us to go into the game, obviously, at the Riverside. And like I say, it's one of them things, we're going up against two teams that have 100% records. After this, obviously, Bristol City being the other one. Yeah. Both of them have made a good start, so it's going to be tough, but hopefully we can get something out of those games.
Yeah, fingers crossed, mate. I mean, just seen a couple of seconds ago, Matthew Grove's comment go across the screen, and obviously David Richardson again saying about Roberts be a good asset to the team. And I think David makes a really good point there. It's keeping Patrick Roberts injury-free that's the key, isn't it? Because there's always that little worry in the back of your mind that he's never too far away from an injury, isn't it, Joe?
Yeah, especially when we lost him after a couple of games last season. Mm-hmm. It's just important that we keep Roberts injury free as possible, because obviously once we lose that, who do you turn to play in his position? Obviously, at the moment, it probably mostly going to be look like it's just Tavernier, because obviously there's been a lot of talk of Marcus Brown going back on loan to Oxford. So it's important that we keep players like Roberts injury free as possible. Otherwise, we're going to be in a lot of trouble again. Obviously, we can still have players who play in that position. Obviously, I think Lewis Swing can play there as well, but it's just a case of keeping players who can play in their natural positions injury free are going to be key for us from now until possibly when the transfer window opens again in January.
Yeah. Pete Robbo again back in with, where would you play Roberts? Would you give him the number 10 role? Do you think Warnock will play 10 role? Do you think there's room for him to play Roberts there, or would he play him out wide? Where do you see him fitting in, Joe?
Judging by the positions that, like the tactics that Warnock's doing at the moment, I can possibly see Roberts being possibly on the right wing position and have Tavernier out on the left, and have possibly Akpom and Assombalonga as the two strikers if he sticks in that position. So if it's judging by the way at the moment, it looks like he could be on the right wing and having possibly a number 10 role if Warnock decides to rotate with the squad at certain points of the season.
Yeah, because that was an interesting one on Saturday. We didn't mention it early on about Tavernier, where he playing him at right wing back. He was defensively, he didn't do too bad, but do you think that's a long-term position for Tav, or do you think that was just maybe a one-off at the weekend?
I think it probably might be just a one-off, just in case if someone else is able to play in that position. Obviously, there's one occasion that you could put Howson in that position, and at one time you could put Spence in that position. And I think it may be just a one-off thing, possibly for Tav on last Saturday, but I'd probably just see Tav more in the wing positions, to be honest.
Right. Well, before we move off the Reading game and we close the show, Joe, it's maybe a bit difficult to make a prediction for that Reading game a week on Saturday, because obviously there's still a transfer window that's open till a week on Friday, and there could be incomings and outgoings at both clubs. And obviously we've got the international break hanging over us, so we'll have the likes of George Saville and Paddy McNair potentially involved in 3 games for Northern Ireland.
Yeah.
It's a tough one to predict, but I'm going to ask you to put your neck on the chopping block. What do you reckon is going to happen against Reading? Will their 100% record go at the Riverside?
Well, if that were to happen, it probably will be a draw. So I'm going to go with a 2-2 draw, I think, because I can't. I just it's just a case of if Reading, slip up at the vital time, because as the old saying goes, 100% records don't last forever. But in our case, I'd take a draw against them, to be honest.
You take a draw, right? Well, as you mentioned earlier on, it's a big week. The start of that week, Joe. We've obviously got Reading at home, and then we've got games on the road at Bristol City and Cardiff, both difficult matches, which we'll cover next week. But I'm afraid we're out of time, everybody, for this week's show. Thank you so much, Joe, for joining us again and being very frank in your opinions and being very honest as well. Appreciate it as always, mate. Okay?
Yep. No worries, mate. Cheers.
If you haven't done so already, Borough fans, do yourself a favour, subscribe to Borough Fan TV. There's no Borough game, as we've mentioned, next week, and it's the international break, but we will be back next Monday night with a special show. There'll be more details to be revealed during the week, but we have got a special show planned for next Monday. So until then, from Joe and from myself, James Hutchinson, thanks for watching. Good night and up the Borough.
Up the Borough.